like there's a possibility there may be many others involved as well. So we will stay on it and keep covering it. Now to this. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is vowing a fight after Democrat Amy McGrath officially announced her campaign to oust him in what could be one of the 2020 election's biggest congressional races. McGrath's announcement on our show yesterday generated tons of buzz, trending on Twitter for most of the day, along with the hashtag Ditch Mitch. The former fighter pilot was one of the most prominent Democratic congressional candidates during last year's midterm elections, narrowly losing her bid to unseat Republican Congressman Andy Barr in Kentucky's 6th congressional district. Speaking on Capitol Hill yesterday, McConnell was asked if he's worried about McGrath as an opponent.
Well, you know, unlike a lot of my members, I won't name any names, I actually enjoy campaigns. As you know, I've had a few of them. And it'll be a spirited race, particularly since I've become leader of my in the Senate. I've noticed I get more attention than I used to.
President Trump tweeted, Democrats are coming after our great Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell. Why would Kentucky ever think of giving up the most powerful position in Congress? The Senate majority, boy, what a drain the swamp thing to say. The Senate Majority Leader, for a freshman senator with little power in what will hopefully be the minority party. We need Mitch in the Senate to keep America great. Claire McCaskill, my, how things have changed. It does not seem, I know, it does not seem, though, like Mitch's team is too concerned right now. They responded to the claims that this was going to be a blockbuster race by saying, yes, McGrath is Blockbuster, Mitch is Netflix. So away we go.
Yeah, I got to tell you, they are really worried. They may act like they're not, because there's a real outsider-insider dynamic here. And that's a powerful dynamic in today's politics. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. If you're of Washington, you got to be worried if a Marine fighter pilot is coming after you, because that just signals outsider. This is not someone who's of Washington. Now, she's going to have to be very careful because this is a conservative state. You know, she is going to have to appeal to the suburban voters and reassure them that she gets that they can't afford to retire and that we've got to figure out a way not to get so far in debt that our grandchildren are faced with horrific choices in terms of funding programs in America. But I've talked to her. She's strong, she's smart, and she really has a fire in her belly about going after this race and going after who, and by the way, she'll have plenty of money. Money is going to pour into this woman for all the right reasons. So if Mitch McConnell and his team say they're not worried, that's because they're used to winning by fighting dirty. And I have a feeling fighting dirty against this candidate's not going to work.
Jake Sherman, it's really interesting. Donald Trump ran as an outsider. He personified the outside populist candidate. Now he's appealing to the people of Kentucky to vote for the swampiest person and actually saying, vote for the guy who knows the swamp better than anybody else, who's been up to his neck in the swamp longer than anybody else, who can bring home the bacon better than anybody else. You talk about crossing your messages. That's what President Trump's doing. And at least what I found in change elections, the last thing people care about, they just, for the most part, if they want change, they're not looking at the person who can, quote, bring home the bacon. They want change.
You know, actually, Donald Trump made a similar argument when Republicans were looking to oust John Boehner in a speaker's election. Not a lot of people remember that, but Donald Trump, who was a golf buddy of John Boehner's, made that argument during the internal election back about 5 years ago. Just want to play devil's advocate here for a second, and we laid this out in Playbook in the afternoon edition yesterday. Kentucky is a state that voted by 30 points for Donald Trump. Amy McGrath, while I agree with Senator McCaskill that she has a lot of upside and a lot of interesting elements to her candidacy, lost the easiest district for a Democrat to win in the best year for Democrats in more than a decade in her race against Andy Barr.
Why do you think that is, Jake? What was the buzz afterward? Did they blame her as a candidate?
Yes, very much so.
Why did
yes,
that,
the
and
Democrats
and
D.C. Democrats did not want her, despite what they'll say now, did not want her to win that primary. She ran against the former mayor of Lexington, Kentucky, Jim Gray, who was popular, and the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, didn't outwardly support Gray, but certainly did tacitly behind the scenes. They did not think she was a good candidate. I don't care what they say now. She raised $8 million. Andy Barr raised $5 million. She still lost by 3 percentage points, more than 10,000 votes. And remember, Mitch McConnell in 2014 ran against Allison Lundergan Grimes, who was the Secretary of State, who had won her statewide election by 21 points, a Democrat in Kentucky, by 21 points, and McConnell beat her by 16. I'm not saying every race is analogous, but I understand she's an interesting candidate in a year, but in a year that we don't know what Donald Trump is going to look like in 2020. This is a red state, and you have to assume if Donald Trump, even if his margin gets cut in half to 15 points, you're going to have to imagine a lot of Donald Trump, Amy McGrath voters, and I don't know if I see that now. I'm not predicting that McConnell's going to win, but this is not as easy as D.C. Democrats would like to make it seem.
Steve, you and I were talking a little bit
Totally
earlier.
agree.
There's a bit of a Beto O'Rourke effect here, which is to say that nationally, Democrats are going to invest a lot in Amy McGrath. They're going to invest a lot of money in Amy McGrath because they'd like to see her take out Mitch McConnell the way they wanted to see Beto O'Rourke take out Ted Cruz in Texas.
Yeah, the opportunity to go after Ted Cruz was too much for most Democratic donors to pass up. That's why he was able to raise that money, O'Rourke was. But also, O'Rourke was able to get some polls in the final few months of that campaign that suggested he had a shot, and I think that really increased donors' appetite. I mean, I agree with what Jake's saying. To put this in perspective, we talk about how polarized our politics have become in the age of red and blue and tribalized. How many times since 2000, since that 2000 election that gave us the red states and blue states, has somebody run against an incumbent senator in a presidential election year where the president from the incumbent party is carrying that state, let alone by 30 points, as Trump did in Kentucky? There are two examples of this since 2000 of it actually happening, and they both come with massive asterisks. One was in 2008 in Alaska. Ted Stevens was the incumbent. His party, John McCain, his candidate, won the presidential race in Alaska by 22. Stevens was convicted of federal corruption charges a week before the election. He lost by a point. And the other example is in Claire McCaskill's home state of Missouri in 2000. And the asterisk there, unfortunately, was the Democratic challenger, Mel Carnahan, was killed in a plane crash just before the election. His name remained on the ballot, and he unseated, as George W. Bush carried the state by 3 points, he unseated the incumbent, John Ashcroft there. Those are the only two cases where that's happened. And McGrath's trying to pull it off in a state that Trump is likely to win by between 20, 25, 30 points.
So, Claire, what gives you the optimism for Amy?
Well, first of all, I don't think Trump will win by 20, 25, 30 points. I think Trump's numbers are going to be depressed. I think if she runs a smart campaign, and she learned, I think, from the last campaign, I can list, and I know Steve can list, a lot of senators who lost big campaigns before they were elected senator. I'm one of them. And there are, in fact, the Senate is littered with people who lost big campaigns and turned around as little as 2 years later and actually succeeded. I get it. This is tough. I get it. Kentucky's a hard state. Believe me, I feel it. I get it. But I do know this, that I was much closer to my opponent than the 20 points Donald Trump won Missouri by, and I was the insider, and my opponent was the outsider. And I just think we are minimizing the insider-outsider deal in this election, and I think next year is